Okay, so, and please open the shades. Whether or not you like Sabaton, and if you don't, I don't know why, but that's fine. Whether or not you like Sabaton, they do an incredibly good job of researching their history. The story of the Swiss Guards and their last stand is a small part of Charles V's invasion of Rome. But the invasion of Rome and the sack of Rome by Charles V, despite the best efforts of those guards who died defending the Pope, was the end of the Renaissance. There is actually an end point. And part of that is simply that Italy, make sure you have your notes out, that Italy did not have the wealth that it once did. Charles came through from Austria, through Venetia, and down into Rome. And when his army left, so did so much of the wealth. And without the wealth, the excess wealth that the church used to make the art, there wasn't going to be that much more art that was going to be made. So in that sense, it's the end of the Renaissance. It's also such a horrible event for the Italians and for the Pope that a lot of the sort of bubbling, effervescent, optimistic creativity that had made the Renaissance its own golden age also petered out. So, other things besides the invasion of 1527. Previous to that, from 1494 up through Charles V's invasion, the French actually invaded Italy several times. And this is something that the church had to contend with. So it's not like the church was out of the woods. The church was under a pretty consistent threat throughout the late Renaissance from the kings who saw in the Pope an opportunity to create a popate. That vision of the Roman Catholic Church as servant of the government is something which again and again the church has to resist. Okay. The rise of diplomacy. We take it for granted that it's normal to have embassies in the capitals and in significant cities around the world. But it's not at all self-evident. One of the problems that we're having with the Middle East and with the East Asians is that they don't have the same tradition of diplomacy. So what is this tradition that we're talking about? Well, it's a Western notion, and it comes from Europe being a bunch of small countries, a bunch of small nation states. How do you do business with the other governments? How do you do business, if you're a king, with the other kings? Well, what is set up is a system of ambassadors who are the personal representatives of the king to the other realms. So if I were the President of the United States, which I'm not, because things would be different. Probably, maybe worse, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing as president, because I've never been one. Never mind. I'm no. So, if I'm president of the United States, and I want somebody to be my representative to the Pope, I'll send Pius to Rome to be my ambassador, and we do have an ambassador to the Pope. If I want somebody to go to England, I'll send Portia. No. If I want somebody to go to Ireland, I'll send Alexander. If I want somebody to go to Lithuania, well, you're already a Lithuanian, so it's not going to work. But you may be a Lithuanian ambassador to me. The idea is that what we do is we send personal representatives, and the other countries send personal representatives to us. Now, where are they going to live and work? They're going to live and work in an embassy. An ambassador lives and works in an embassy. Now, embassies are not part of the native country. If you are in Vilnius, which is the capital of Lithuania, and you are in the American embassy, once you cross through that gate, you're on American soil. There are United States Marines guarding the facility, and you are no longer under the jurisdiction of the Lithuanian government, you are under the jurisdiction of the United States of America. Conversely, if you are in Washington, D.C., and you wish to enter the Lithuanian embassy, once you cross through the gate, you are no longer on U.S. soil. You are on Lithuanian soil. The embassy system is the only way that governments can really do business with one another without without banditry or the temptation to just use violence, tempting you to do something stupid and self-destructive and destructive of the whole system. The idea of embassies is one of the bases of international law because no one should violate an embassy's sanctity. If we go to war, when we went to war with Germany in World War II, the German embassy in Washington, D.C., and the American embassy in Berlin both evacuated lawfully. The people in those embassies did not become hostages. An arrangement was made between the Nazi government and the United States government to bring their diplomats out of the United States and to bring our diplomats out of Nazi Germany. And since both sides have potential hostages, the Western European tradition, the European tradition, is for both parties, even if they're at war, to give safe passage to the diplomats. During the war, you're not even supposed to occupy the enemy's embassy. You're supposed to leave it alone, as long as there's nobody there. The embassy is supposed to be sacred soil of whoever is here with an ambassador. And in other cities throughout your kingdom or your empire or your republic, there are what are called consulates. In Benghazi, Libya, the American consulate comes under attack by Islamist terrorists on September the 11th, 2012. It was a breach of international law because not only were they attacking Americans, but they were attacking an American consulate. Consulate, like an embassy, is supposed to be American soil, wherever it is in the world. But this system only works if everyone wants to play ball. It's like a cat leash. Most cats don't work well on a leash. But if you dangle string and the cat goes, and then the cat's holding onto the string, it's a cat leash. You can use it like a leash until the cat gets bored and goes, and now it's not a leash anymore. A cat leash is a system that binds if both parties agree. So long as both parties agree, it's going to work out. In 1979, Iranian students, actually terrorists, supported by their government, broke through the gates, overwhelmed the Marines, and captured everyone in the U.S. Embassy. And for 333 days, our embassy staff was held hostage by Iranian terrorists. The Iranian government was supposed to use their police or military to go in and save our people. But they didn't, because the Iranian government was behind the terrorists. That is a breach of the diplomatic system, and it threatens our ability to have ambassadors. Today, the Red Chinese, the People's Republic of China, the Chinese Communist Party, routinely harasses diplomats and American citizens who are lawfully in China. For example, the chief executive of Huawei, which is a Chinese internet conglomerate, was arrested by the Canadians a few years ago at the behest of President Trump because Huawei was a front and is a front for the Chinese military. And they were stealing American secrets. She was incarcerated in Canada and she was going to be transferred to the United States for trial. The Chinese Communist Party said, no, you will release her. And they grabbed 2 Canadians and 2 Americans and have held them hostage until last week. The Canadian government, no longer pressured by an American administration who was interested, Biden has no interest in prosecuting the head of Huawei. Canadians released the head of Huawei, and wouldn't you know it, the 2 Canadians and 2 Americans were also released back home to us.
They were alive.
Yeah, they were alive.
Right.
Well, no, their hostages aren't very good. Now, in North Korea, they captured a guy a few years ago because why the hell would any American go to North Korea? But he was there. I think he was a missionary or something. He had reason. He had lawful reason to be there. But the Norks arrested him in any case, and he came back with terminal brain damage. He died within a few days of arriving home. So the North Koreans not only arrested somebody unlawfully, God forbid, who would have thought, but they tortured him. Yeah.
I think the guy you're talking about, he was a journalist, and he took down a poster or something, and then they got really mad.
Makes total sense to me. It's appropriate justice in a totalitarian communist dictatorship. You take down a poster probably of one of the Kims, Kim Il Sung, Kim Jong Il, or Kim Jong Un, and no, you get terminal brain damage, and years of being in prison, and then you get sent back home to die in front of your family. The diplomatic system is designed so that countries can have international relations, but countries outside the West don't necessarily follow it in the spirit that it's intended to be. The taille is a French tax that's only on land if you're not noble. So it's a tax that the government levies on the poorest of Frenchmen. Think about this. In the United States, the top 10% of taxpayers, and it may be the top 5%, it's been a while since I've revisited the statistic. The top 5 or 10% of America's taxpayers pay over 50% of America's taxes. It bugs me every single time somebody says the rich should pay their fair share. They're not just paying their fair share. They're paying their fair share. They're paying your fair share. In the United States, we have a vast number of people at the bottom and even the lower middle part of our earners who don't pay any federal tax because they get their money back when it's time to file your tax returns. It is overwhelmingly the wealthiest of us who pay the vast majority of our taxes, because we have this notion of progressive taxation whereby if you're poor, the government shouldn't take what little money you have, but if you're rich, you can afford it. And still, the rich are castigated, the top 1%. Ooh, they're so evil. No, they're providing the services that make your life better. In France, under the monarchy, they did the opposite. They taxed the poor, and they taxed the merchants. They did not tax their nobles with money very much. Why? Because the nobles served in the military. Because the nobles served the king at his palace. Because the nobles paid their taxes in duties, in personal duties. Whereas the common people, they paid their tax in money. Or in service, like there was a system called the Corvée in France, where every able-bodied man was expected to donate, I think, a week of their time, maybe two, to repairing local roads, and that was part of your taxes. So for 2 weeks a year, however you stack it, you've got to strap on your work clothes and go out with a shovel and do some physical labor. And the only people who were exempted from that were the nobility, the aristocracy. So the taille is already a hint that in France things are going a little off the rails, but the idea is the nobles pay their taxes by being nobles, the common people pay their taxes in money. Finally, the Hanseatic League. The Hanseatic League is a system it's a trade alliance of cities. So Lübeck in Germany, or Danzig in East Prussia, what's now Gdansk, Poland. There is a network of cities that are around the Baltic and North Seas that are all part of the Hanseatic League. If I want to ship some hops and barley for beer from East Prussia to somewhere in Western Germany by sea, if I ship it from Danzig to Lübeck, which are both Hanseatic cities, there's going to be a fairly pro forma inspection. And I won't have to pay more than the basic port fees and shipping fees. If, however, I ship the same product to a non-Hanseatic city, say, London. I don't think London was in the Hanseatic League. I could be wrong. But to some city outside the league, not only is my gear going to be inspected more suspiciously, but I'm going to end up paying a lot more in entry fees and fees for the inspection. You pay for the inspection yourself. I'm going to pay for all sorts of stuff. So within the league, trade is eased because there's less government restrictions, there's less government regulation, and there are fewer taxes taken and fees assessed. If you trade outside the league, it becomes more expensive. All of this is designed to pool wealth. By creating a free trade zone within the Hanseatic League, the cities of that league boost their economies More goods in, more goods out, more buying, more selling, heating up of the economic engine, which is going to make everyone wealthier. If the economy is good, almost everyone benefits. If the economy is bad, most everyone suffers. So a system that's good for the economy, that's good for the free market, lowering taxes, reducing regulation, that almost always improves commercial activity and brings economic success. So the Hanseatic League is a free trade zone of North Sea and Baltic Sea cities. Yes?
Do you get like taxed a bunch if you're not part of the Hanseatic League, but you bring
Yeah, if you bring things in because you're not part of the league, yeah, they're going to give you additional taxes.
And is that also a heavier inspection?
Yes. Yeah, and the inspector is going to be much less forgiving. If there's a problem with your stuff, the inspector, if you're a co-Hanseatic League trader, might say, okay, you have to pay a fee. Whereas if you're not, they might say, okay, this doesn't meet inspection, send it back. So you've got a cargo hold full of merchandise, but because you're not part of the league, the port inspector is not necessarily going to be open to the idea of you paying a fee and still being able to sell your stuff here. Instead, you've got to go back home. Make sense? So that's everything you need to know for the quiz tomorrow. It is an 80-question quiz. Geography is on it. And all of the stuff that we have covered with the Renaissance and some late medieval stuff too, just to make sure you remember.
8 times as long as Mr. Sabathi's.
What?
It's like 8 times as long as Mr. Sabathi.
Mr. Sabatki is a wonderful man and a wonderful teacher, but he and I teach very different topics, and we're probably very different types of teachers. Yes?
What happened to our other quizzes? The one quiz that I got 90% on.
Yeah, what happened to that? I don't know. I've got see that pile over there on top of my printer?
Yep.
I've got a bunch of correcting from last week that I haven't gotten to yet because it's been crazy busy.
Yeah, I got a 90%.
So at some point you will get your work back once I correct it.
Okay.
Are you sure?
I'm gonna put it up on.
No, I'm not sure.
No, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking
Fine.
to her. I asked her if she cheated. And
Ah.
she
I
was like,
didn't
no.
You better not.
I didn't. I actually studied.
That's good.
I found Quizlets on. Never mind.
Yeah, because I'm not supposed to know about those.
I told you about those yesterday.
Yes, you did, but I'm not supposed to know.
Yeah.
Why?
Did
You violated student secrecy.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
Shh, don't tell anyone. Okay. So you may talk quietly amongst yourselves with your crazy, crazy costumes until the
I still
end
can't
of the
believe
period.
that we're matching. Alright, that's so cool.